opalite thoughts. So this was fitting into my thoughts that I'm still kind of developing, but I had a lot of thoughts about Showgirl being an additional sort of the tail end of purgatory, kind of. Still doing research on that, but just gonna go through these annotations and try to give you some context about this without, because if I try to just like keep writing my whole thorough analysis, it's gonna take forever. So basically, opalite. It's interesting. One of the main themes of purgatory is, well, one of the main themes is time, and one of the main themes is love. So this is this mentions love a lot, and love sort of being this harmony that goes up in the bridge that replicates like twist and shout, and part of it's kind of the central question of the entire Commedia, which is comprised of the Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. Purgatory is in the middle, and it kind of the middle of Purgatory, like literally like Purgatory's like chapters or cantos like 15 through 17 really discuss the kernel of how Dante like views life, and he has this question of like why are there evil people, why do people misbehave, all of that, and he creates this kind of framework. He takes a lot of inspiration from like Aristotle and Aquinas and even Augustine and stuff, but I don't even trying to recall if this is completely his framework or something. But he talks about it that it's actually all actions have their goal come from love, but sometimes love is just very twisted. So he has this whole diagram of like you can love the wrong thing, you can love something too much, you can love it too little, like all of these different. I think those are the three main ones, but goes through this very thorough discussion, and everything is just a misguided. Every evil behavior is just like a misguided love of like loving yourself too much, or being not having your sort of idea, like not having his ideas that love ultimately should lead you towards the divine or towards spirituality. He has obviously the Christian framework, but he also constantly undercuts theology and rewrites it. So how Catholic was he? That's not a Catholic thing that Catholics can do. So he ultimately thought, poetry and love led you towards God. And so anything that doesn't lead you towards heaven is like a twisted love. And he uses that word like twisted a lot because he uses he says that's like one of the first things he says in the entire poem is like, I was on the twisted path, or my path to God got a little twisted. So he went off a little bit, and he got more into he had all these visions of God and visions of specifically of Beatrice, this woman who he had this sort of fixation on, or like celestial perception of, and then it kind of got colluded by life, or he got involved the political stress of the time, and he got all like twisted and ended up having to come back to that vision of the divine and realize that's what he wanted to devote his life to, was just trying to put love into words, and also try to focus on his own morality and try to help other people not fall into these sort of pits of like getting too absorbed in violence or anger or anything. And then he also is interested in making, I think above all else comes the structure of the poem, or the structure of his entire conception. So he does things to make like the entire poem symmetrical, or have like an internal scheme that actually defy the theology he sets forth and all of that. So, in that way, he's doing multiple things doing a million things in the poem, but the poem kind of comes first. So, Purgatory is a lot about interesting that the first line is, I had a bad habit. Because that's literally what Purgatory is about, whereas the Inferno is about actions. It's like bad actions that you took that you did not regret at all. Basically everyone who's in Inferno, except like the pagans, and they're not really in hell proper, has never regretted for 1 second what they've done. If you regret it all, you end up in Purgatory. So that's part of it. But Purgatory is more about purging these predilections in your soul, like you have this sort of like urge to do something that's a little bit not great, or like you have, you know, this urge for envy, or you have this little pride that's like a little bit too outsized, or it's all of these things, and it's like getting rid of more of your personality, like stresses. Like if you have specific stresses about a certain thing, it's like getting rid of that, like when you have a pinch about something. And there's a lot, yeah. So that's what purgatory is all about. It's about like different ways. There's all these different ways that it's a mountain, and there's different spaces you end up on, different parts of the mountain, versus if you have like a specific stress about something. And there's all these different things, and it's sort of like some, like the people with like envy are like you have to stay on the terraces for like a few hundred years, and so it's like sort of, it's not really torture, but it's like kind of some discomfort, I would say, physical discomfort, maybe a little bit torturous, but to break that sort of like, you know, urge or whatever. So that's what's going on, purging bad habits. And missing lovers past in the beginning of purgatory, and it's a theme throughout purgatory that it's like the souls are sort of like gradually leaving behind their earthly life, and they're turning towards heaven, because that's where they're ultimately going. It's just going to take several hundred years, or however long, however deep their stress is, you know. But they're gradually turning towards God, or they're gradually turning towards like the divine and the universe, and for, you know, but they have this like idea of, ooh, my friends, ooh, I liked it on Earth, like, ooh, I loved sitting, you know, with my friends and singing songs. Like they talk about that a lot, especially at the beginning when he's on the purgatory beach that has like very newly deceased souls that have just been saved. And they come in on this giant boat that comes in from the Tiber River in Rome, and they're like, wait, where am I? Oh my God. So it's kind of like missing that past love, missing that past experience you had on Earth, and gradually that like fades as you go further up the mountain, and you get further like immersed in this celestial realm. And of course they're all ghosts, ghosts or shades. Dante is physically in his body, but everyone else is a ghost. And it also like has to do with a lot of like the limits of reason, and the limits, like you have to sort of put reason aside, and you have to start following your like inner soul, or they follow the sun, like, because the mountain is kind of treacherous, and they're trying to figure out a way to get up the mountain, and they can't like reason it out, but they have to sort of like go into this almost like surrender to the, you know, the divine will, or like the surrender to just like what their intuition is telling them about how to climb up the mountain, and following the pattern of the sun going around the mountain. And the sun's like a metaphor for the divine. So when you know, you know. When you don't, you don't. The limits of reason, and that's part of why Virgil is able to mostly get them through hell without a hitch. But Virgil, who is a pagan, even though he's a great intellect and moralist, he cannot make it up purgatory alone, because he doesn't have the skill set. Because he's theoretically a pagan. What else? So, life is a song, it ends when it ends. Purgatory 2, and there's actually like a song that Dante wrote that he includes in, he has like another friend who's a poet who died, who he meets up, and they reference, and they say, oh my God, it's a song called Love, which, it's sort of a sonnet that someone set to music, which is called like Love Which Discourses With Me in Mind, or something. The songs are like a huge theme through Purgatory too. They're constantly singing like hymns, and there's absolutely no music allowed in hell, so, because it's too close to God to have music, because like music, the idea of like the harmony of the spheres, and like the spinning of like the will of God or whatever, is what's like creating the harmony of the universe. So music is far too close to God to be allowed in hell. So it's like a huge deal when there's you hear music in Purgatory.